Good morning. My name is Emily Whitehurst, and I am proud to serve as the Houston Area Women's Center President and CEO. Our organization is affectionately known by many as HAWC. I would like to welcome you to our residential campus. It is a bit unusual for us to be hosting a press conference on this campus, and this is a signal of a pivot that we are making as an organization in our strategy. This has long been an undisclosed location, and in light of the critical needs, safety needs that are not being met by Houston and the Houston region for women and children fleeing violence, we have decided to expand our campus. We are building a 4-story housing facility right over there, and it will triple our capacity to provide real-time safety. If you would like, we have media tours offered after our press conference to go see this extraordinary facility. This will in effect become a 5.5-acre one-stop shop for all survivors, men, women, and children in the region to get the best care in the wake of an assault or violence. We're really proud to open this campus up. It will remain secure, and always the confidentiality of the residents will be protected. I also want to welcome you specifically to the Children's Enrichment Room. This room is where we support the children who live in our residential campus after school and in the summer. So in just about a week, this place will be bustling every day of the summer with children who are here to play and learn and be cared for. And we are really proud to do that work. I think many people don't realize how many of our residents on this campus are children. We are here this morning to do two very, very important things. First, we want to respond to the interim report of the HPD, Houston Police Department Independent Review Committee's report, which lists HAWC as a vital partner with a very important role to play in how victims are notified about the status of their incident report, and lists us as a trainer for all members of the Special Victims Division within HPD. That's unprecedented and extraordinary for us to be recognized at that level as a partner. We've long been playing that part, and we're proud to get that recognition. We are also here today to announce Mary Sickler, Miss Houston, as the spokesperson for our Survivor Speaks campaign. The Houston Area Women's Center has a very critical role to play in Houston, in the state of Texas, and nationally. When HAWC is at the table, survivors are at the table. HAWC is the city's designated rape crisis center. We provide comprehensive services to all survivors of sexual assault and sex trafficking. We represent survivors in efforts to improve community-wide response to survivors. And maybe most importantly, we work every day to prevent sexual assault from happening in the first place. In addition to being Houston's Rape Crisis Center, HAWC is also the presiding officer of the Sexual Assault Response Team, Harris County's Sexual Assault Response Team. The purpose of this team is to provide a multidisciplinary, collaborative response to all survivors of sexual assault that is individualized, trauma-informed, increases their safety, promotes a continuity of care, supports and empowers survivors while holding offenders accountable in a fair and just system. In both capacities, HAWC plays a critical role in Houston and throughout the region. Earlier this year, HPD let the community know that over 260,000 incident reports had been suspended due to lack of personnel. They'd been coded in that way, starting in 2016. And in that large number included thousands and thousands of sexual assault incidents. We recognize the gravity of this situation and appreciate HPD's transparency and commitment to making things right. It is our intention to leverage this moment of reckoning to raise awareness about sexual assault and to elevate the voices of survivors throughout the process. We are committed to being at the table to advise on victim notification protocols, and we are already putting plans in place to make sure that all the members of HPD's Special Victims Unit are trained in a crisis response, trauma-informed, specifically designed training for them. We also want to leverage this moment for advocacy. We have launched a Survivors Speaks campaign. This campaign features a diverse array of courageous voices of survivors in both Spanish and English. This campaign aims to do nothing less than truly revolutionize the systems, protocols that survivors encounter when they are reporting or if they're not reporting, and to make sure that survivors are provided with the compassionate and trauma-informed care they deserve. And I just want to recognize that we have two of our courageous survivor voices represented in the room, Ana Palanco and Silvia Rodriguez. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your courage in speaking up. Sexual assault is the most underreported and probably the most misunderstood crime. That is why it is so important that we listen and believe when survivors speak. By doing so, Houston, our law enforcement partners, and the Houston Area Women's Center can become a national model instead of a cautionary tale. It is my distinct pleasure now to introduce my colleague, Sonia Corrales. She is the Deputy CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center. She has over 30 years in the movement. She started her career at HAWC, accompanying survivors to the hospital in the wake of their assault. She has become an incomparable subject matter expert and advocate. She has been listening to survivors and shaping HAWC to provide caring, confidential, community-based responses for decades. She is playing a leading role in local and state efforts to change policies and develop protocols, and she is the chair of the Sexual Assault Response Team. So please welcome Sonia Corrales.
Good morning, everyone. Y buenos días. I'm going to say my remarks in English, and then I'm going to say them in Spanish before I introduce Mary. I want to start by just talking about sexual violence in a little bit of a different way. Sexual violence is a traumatic personal violation that is usually committed by someone the survivor has trusted, violating their sense of self with life-changing consequences. For 47 years, the Houston Area Women's Center has stood alongside survivors. Many of our survivors don't ever report to the police, and we stood alongside them. Whenever they decided, before they decided to report to the police, we were there. During the process, we are there. And long after the process is over, we are there. We're an agency that is open 24 hours a day and available 365 days a year. You see, we have been in the business of helping survivors define what justice means to them. Sexual assault is a public health issue. It's a crisis. And in order to effectively respond and prevent sexual violence in this community, we must do it together in a multidisciplinary way. As the presiding officer of the Sexual Assault Response Team, I want to emphasize how important it is that we have a SART in this community. And Emily talked about the mission. And every SART member, some of whom are here today, if you're a SART member, please raise your hand. Just kind of wave. We have all agreed to this collective response, where we can identify and address gaps, strengthen our roles, and strengthen our relationships. The SART members, for those of you who may not know, include rape crisis advocates, like rape crisis centers like the Houston Area Women's Center, systems-based advocates that are located within police departments or the DA's office, medical forensic nurses who provide the medical forensic exams, law enforcement, the district attorney's office, mental health providers, and other community organizations. We are committed as a SART to the mission because at the very minimum, survivors deserve the opportunity for justice and to be treated with compassion and respect anytime that they're engaging in any resources in the community or navigating the criminal justice system. This HPD interim report centers survivors and promotes partnerships and accountability, and we are pleased to see the opportunities for that authentic collaboration that ultimately will make improvements in this community. There is no one discipline who can do this work alone. And if you're a discipline who can think that they can do it alone, then you're not client-centered. And so there's no one entity, there's no one discipline who can do this work alone. We must do it together. And the ultimate consequence of the lack of authentic collaboration is to the survivor. Now I'm going to say my remarks in Spanish. La violencia sexual es una violación personal, traumática, generalmente cometida por alguien que la sobreviviente confía, violando su sentido de ser misma, con consecuencias que cambian su vida. Durante los 47 años, el Centro de Mujeres del área de Houston ha apoyado a sobrevivientes cuando no reportan a la policía, antes de que deciden reportar, durante este proceso y mucho después. Muchas las veces lo que hemos hecho en este centro es ayudar a sobrevivientes a definir qué es justicia para ellas, porque no la han encontrado en otros lugares. La agresión sexual es una crisis de salud pública y para responder y prevenir la violencia sexual en nuestra comunidad debemos hacerlo juntos, de una manera multidisciplinaria. Como presidente de este equipo de Sexual Assault Response Team, que quiere decir es un equipo de responder a la agresión sexual, tenemos que decir que este equipo es muy importante para esta comunidad. La misión es brindar una respuesta multidisciplinaria y colaborativa a sobrevivientes de agresión sexual que es individual para ellas, informada sobre el trauma, que aumenta la seguridad, promueve la continuación de servicios y la atención y ayudará a las sobrevivientes para el futuro. También queremos decirles que parte de la misión es llevar a cabo a las personas que están dañando a las sobrevivientes a la justicia, pero en un sistema que es justo. Todos los miembros de este equipo, algunos que están aquí, estamos comprometidos y hemos aceptado esta misión. Los miembros incluyen organizaciones como el Centro de Mujeres del área de Houston, el programa de evaluación sexual, otros asesoras dentro de sistemas como el sistema del Departamento de Policía o la Fiscalía, enfermeras médicas forensas, obviamente la policía, los fiscales del distrito y otros proveedores de salud mental aquí en la comunidad. Estamos comprometidos de esta misión porque por lo mínimo, sobrevivientes merecen una oportunidad a encontrar la justicia y ser tratadas con compasión y respeto cuando estén buscando ayuda en sus recursos en la comunidad o cuando están navegando el sistema de justicia criminal. Este reporte que salió del Departamento de Policía del área de Houston centra a las sobrevivientes y promueve colaboración. Y nosotros nos da gusto tener esa oportunidad de tener una colaboración donde vamos a hacer cambios en el futuro. Sin que exista ninguna colaboración en ninguna disciplina, últimamente, al fin de cuentas, las que sufren son las sobrevivientes. Y necesitamos hacer este trabajo juntos en una manera que es multidisciplinaria. So now I'd like to, thank you for that, gracias. I'd like to introduce Ms. Houston, Mary Sickler. So you're going to hear more about Mary, but Mary is just a fabulous woman. She has used the platform of Ms. Houston to talk about sexual violence. She is a survivor of sexual assault. She's a pre-law student, and so she is a strong advocate a champion for women's rights, and she is an ambassador and speaks out about sexual assault. Mary.
College isn't supposed to be a cautionary tale. You always think your story will be different. It's happened to other girls, but it wouldn't happen to you. It couldn't. Until it does. Until it was me. In 2021, on October 16th, I started a normal day at New York University. My dream school. One that ended in tattered hopes when I was raped. It happened again on November 19th by someone who I once trusted as a friend. Wrestling with crushing rage and shame, I finally spoke up. I am here today to talk about my experience of speaking up by reporting the crime and the effects that it has had on my life. As I courageously walked into the NYPD, I was filled with emotions. Emotions that quickly went from fright to frustration when the first question was asked. What were you wearing? That question is the reason why I am here today. I decided in that moment that I had to turn this pain I was feeling into some sort of purpose. These types of victim-blaming questions are unacceptable, and the reasons why so many survivors stay silent. This contributes to the lack of accountability in society and why so many survivors continue to blame themselves. If someone's home is broken into and then they go to report it to the police, they are not asked these types of questions. So why, when someone's own body is broken into, are these questions being asked? After leaving the police station, I immediately regretted my decision to report. But that regret would soon escalate even more. After he was arrested on 8 counts of sexual violence, he was released for being so young. After all, how dare I try to interrupt a promising young man's education? But what about mine? After being unable to continue my education at NYU, I was told that I could just transfer if I did not want to be in the same class as my perpetrator. I soon transferred to Rice University in the fall of 2022, but my journey in the criminal court system was not over. After a year and a half of my case being in the hands of the DA's department, it was dropped without me even knowing. I tell this story because I'm a survivor and my voice matters. Regardless of if a survivor reports, regardless of if a survivor finds justice in the criminal court system, regardless of if a survivor even told anyone what happened at the time, their voice is worthy to be heard. We cannot depend on the criminal justice system to make it whole, but we should be able to depend on the community that surrounds us to help aid in our recovery. I believe Houston to be the greatest city in this country, but I also believe Houston needs great reform in the way we treat survivors. This is where the Houston Area Women's Center can help benefit this city. As Miss Houston USA, I've made changing the conversations around sexual assault my advocacy. I cannot thank the Houston Area Women's Center enough for all the work they do to help survivors and our community. They have transformed the way survivors in Houston are able to access help that they so desperately need in arguably the most challenging moments in their life. The only way that HAWC can continue helping Houstonians is through community aid. Financial assistance is necessary to make this possible. Together, we are changing the narrative surrounding rape, domestic violence, sex trafficking, and sexual abuse. And you may be wondering why I'm using the word rape. But I would like you to ask yourself one question. Why are we more scared of the facts than the coward who walks free? The facts are that 30% of female college students report having been raped. 1 in 3 Texans will be victims of sexual abuse, and 8 in 10 know their perpetrator. And this is just who reports. Less than 10% of victims report to the police. Today, I share my story, but countless others either hang silently in this room or watching online. To all the survivors, I see you and I hear you, even in your silence. I will continue to support survivors by sharing my story, and soon will be able to support them even more as an attorney specializing in women's rights. I promise to never stop fighting for you, because ending rape is past due. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for using your platform as Miss Houston and as a survivor to stand up and advocate for sexual assault survivors. We appreciate your bravery, your courage, your support, and your partnership. Thank you. Thank you. As Sonia so powerfully said, Houston Area Women's Center not only stands as an organization that provides 24/7 comprehensive life-saving services for survivors, but we lean into our survivors as experts in how service and advocacy should happen. This not only allows us to maintain our position as thought leaders in the realm of sexual violence, but we serve and advocate to empower survivors in the spirit of violence prevention. In our work with survivors, it's critical that our community understands that every survivor is worthy of help and advocacy. We aim to ensure that survivors of all walks of life are seen and heard, and we work hard to achieve inclusion in our service to survivors and community partners. To us at Houston Area Women's Center, this is what survivors deserve: a full breadth of free, confidential, overarching services that help them not only heal but thrive, while we walk alongside as advocates as they navigate systems designed to support survivors. Survivors deserve emergency shelter as they escape violence, where they receive support and assistance, including transitioning to more permanent housing. Survivors are worthy of hotline and chat services that they can call upon 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We provide our survivors with behavioral health services available at our residential campus or shelter and locations throughout Houston. These locations, known as our empowerment hubs, increase access to life-saving services for survivors. Because we know that financial dependence is one of the leading barriers to survivors' independence, we provide career and education development through our Economic Empowerment Program. Houston Area Women's Center also assists survivors with legal advocacy services, helping them navigate civil and criminal justice systems through advocacy and court accompaniment. And when our survivors are at the hospital after a sexual assault crime has happened, we are there with them, serving as advocates, assisting them with the support that they need. This is what survivors deserve, and we ensure services and advocacy are provided with no time constraints or limitations. At Houston Area Women's Center, we know that not many sexual survivors report this crime for a plethora of reasons. Although we work day in and day out to work with the community partners and systems to strengthen support for survivors to remove the fear of reporting, we understand the difficulty in doing so. We also maintain the stance that the fact that most sexual assaults are not reported does not remove accountability from those who commit these crimes. Survivors deserve more from our families, more from our communities, and more from our systems. And we want survivors to know that if and when they decide to report and or seek services, they will have an advocate standing for and walking alongside them from HAWC. As HAWC continues to serve, stand up for, and walk along survivors, we recognize that this is a pivotal time for our organization, our city, and most of all, our survivors. This is a time for us to respond to the HPD interim report and talk openly. And while we strive to continue our work as thought leaders in the sexual and domestic violence movement, we also recognize that we cannot do this work and cannot provide our survivors what they need alone. We need your support. We rely on the support of our organizational partners, donors, and community members to continue to assist survivors in the way that they deserve to be helped. Now, as we move forward in our quest together to ultimately end sexual assault, we stand firm in our expectation that every survivor will be seen and heard and will not be silenced. That we will strengthen our systems to ensure that they are trauma-informed, survivor voice-centered, and that those who commit abuse are held accountable in every way, and that we destigmatize the shame around sexual abuse so that survivors are not afraid to report and seek the help they need in order to heal. We thank you, and we look forward to our continued work together as we work to serve and advocate for sexual assault survivors until we eradicate sexual abuse for good. Thank you.
That is Shanika Brown, our new Chief Program Officer. We are so grateful that you're here with us. So now we are going to open it up for media Q&A. We look forward to your questions.
Sorry, we go cheat with 11 here. We're just spitting out questions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can someone explain more about the partnership with HPD and how exactly you all are helping them with protocols and making sure?
Hi, thank you for your question. So there's a few ways. One of them is that we do want to also just recognize that we have a sexual assault response team in this community, and that as a sexual assault response team, we're working there. The Houston Area Women's Center and HPD have had a long-standing relationship as long as I have been here, and I've been here over 32 years. And it's, we've made significant improvements. One of the ways that I will tell you that we have worked is there's already a victim notification protocol that was created as a result of another initiative that we had here in Houston. And so that victim notification was utilized by the Houston Police Department when they were notifying survivors, when these incident reports occurred and when they were identifying them. So there was a process already there. Recently, we were invited to go back to HPD and meet with the chief and the command staff and also victim services, Julie Pleasant. And we talked about what that victim notification was going to look like. We talked about different ways of being able to ensure that when survivors were getting notified in the community, depending on the situation, that there were going to be trauma-informed, client-centered, and not re-traumatize survivors. And so we talked about that. That is a work in progress, and so we're still working with HPD on that respect. In that respect.
Can you give examples of what would be the appropriate way for officers to utilize the training when reaching out to some of these survivors? How should it be handled?
Yeah. So one of the important trainings that we provide is what we call neurobiology of trauma. And so when we provide that training to officers, and not only officers, but really anybody who is engaging or responding or have some kind of interaction with the sexual assault survivors, this neurobiology of trauma really helps that service provider, no matter who it is, to understand trauma and to really understand trauma response. Because a lot of times what happens is that immediately, that survivor then becomes their credibility is in question. And so we don't want those kinds of things to go. The questions, they were asked to marry, other questions, we don't want those kinds of questions. So when an officer or anybody is responding to a sexual assault survivors, we want them to understand what trauma looks like. And so if somebody is not crying or visibly crying, that it doesn't mean that they were not sexually assaulted. That's a trauma response. And so being able to understand different kinds of trauma responses is very, very important in supporting sexual assault survivors.
I just want to say thank you for holding this press conference and inviting us to your campus, first of all. To go back to the interim report, two of the recommendations cite HAWC directly, and it says that the mandatory 55-hour training for members of the Special Victims Division, and that victim notification protocols need to be updated in consultation with HAWC. Are those conversations happening when it comes to updating protocols, and are you in the process of starting to create that mandatory training program?
Yes. So to the first question about the victim notification protocols, yes, that is something that we've been in conversation with the Houston Police Department. In fact, we were just there last week. Thursday.
A week ago.
Yes, about a week ago. And just regarding that 55-hour training, that 55-hour training is a very long training, and I do want to acknowledge that Julie Pleasant already sends all of her victim advocates to this 55-hour training, and there are also some officers, because we have other initiatives that we work with HPD on to respond to sexual assault survivors. And so this training it includes everything related to sexual assault and domestic violence. It also includes this neurobiology of trauma that I mentioned. So it's very comprehensive, and we believe that it will certainly help officers in there as they engage with survivors. But the other thing is also about really changing the perceptions, that we have in the community about just sexual violence, period. Sexual assault, I mentioned is a public health crisis. Well, it's a public health problem. It's a community problem. It's not just one entity's problem. It's all of our problem. And so we have to make sure that we understand and we dispel myths around sexual assault. One of them is that somehow people believe that rape is sex, right? So that training will help us understand what the myths are, how to change attitudes, and how to eventually change behaviors. Because if you believe that someone, no matter what they were wearing, no matter how they behaved, or whatever it is, has nothing to do with the crime of sexual assault, then your response is going to be different.
How will it be, what's the accountability for the officers to actually implement these recommendations? I mean, it's one thing to say, sure, we'll do them, but it's completely different to actually do these things every day in practice.
I think one of the very important things is that whenever you have protocols in place, so whenever you have a policy, that policy has to, somebody within the police department is holding those people accountable. That's one way. The other way, and I think that a very important way, is through this sexual assault response team. So the sexual assault response team is made up of a multidisciplinary team where there is accountability, right? So one of the ways is that the protocols that were designed and are still getting designed are going to be evaluated by this SART. So rape crisis centers, the medical staff, the other team members will have an opportunity to continuously evaluate those protocols. And so I think that that definitely is another way for accountability to happen. Oh, yes. One of the things that Emily reminded me of is that part of that sexual assault response team, one of the protocols is to go back and evaluate actual cases. So if, say, for example, we, Houston Area Women's Center, bring a case forward and say, we want the team to evaluate this case because, from our perspective, our survivor is telling us that, there was some misses here. So we want to bring this case forward and then open it up again to evaluate. So if there's gaps, that we identify, let's address those gaps so that it doesn't happen again.
Are you all incorporating survivors too as a part of this training? Are they working with you all, HPD? I don't know if any from the suspended cases.
So I don't know if HPD is, but everything that we do, survivor voices are at the center. Everything that we do. The protocol, the victim notification protocol that was established, the one that was already established by, the lead researcher was the University of Houston, the Institute Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. That's the institute that created that protocol, or did the research and then created that protocol. The people in that research were survivors from the Houston Area Women's Center, and they helped inform. So here you have survivors telling how they want to be notified, when it's not okay to be notified, how they're feeling, and then the different ways to notify survivors. So it's always informed. Like, this is one of the, it's very important to really just have those survivors in the center. And part of the sexual assault response team is also incorporating the survivor voice.
Respecting the survivor's confidentiality, but can you give us an idea of how many survivors reached out to HAWC over the last 6 to 8 weeks and said, hey, I think my case was one of those improperly suspended, and what were those conversations like?
So we did hear, some of it, and without talking about specifically any survivors, I will tell you that, the very first statement that I made was that survivors come to us whether they report or not. And so, and when they report or before they even report. So it's not unlikely that a lot of those incident reports were already clients of the Houston Area Women's Center. I don't know if you want to say.
Just, part of the issue is until those cases are disposed, we're not encouraging survivors necessarily to speak up and speak out. So there is a group of people that we have been working with that are still in process, still anticipating some sort of resolution. And so, yes, we have heard from those clients.
And it's clear from reporting that the intention of the code perhaps was well-intentioned but misguided. Of here are cases that we just don't have the manpower to look into, but we do think there's credible and workable leads. What assurances, if any, have you gotten from HPD that this will never happen when it comes to especially the Special Victims Division, and that they will adequately staff that division so that no cases will be labeled as such?
I think what I would say to that is we've been given a lot of verbal assurances. What I do believe is clear, and this report made clear, is that there are systematic issues that HPD needs to address, and it's multifaceted. It is to my great relief that I do not think the root of this issue was an active disdain for survivors or a lack of intent to do right by them. Whether or not everybody's been trained in neurobiology of trauma, HPD wants to do right by survivors. There are data management issues. There are departmental silos. Any big organization is going to deal with those. So I think the remedy is going to be a longer-term process. And so what I think our role here today is to reinforce to the greater community that HPD being accountable, that holding HPD accountable also means expecting genuine collaboration. Because had we had ongoing genuine collaboration across all of the systems, I don't think this would have happened in that same way. It's bigger than just HPD. Now, that is not to say that there's not real accountability that needs to be laid at HPD's feet, and it is a good thing for me to hear consistently that they have been honest and transparent about what has gone on and how we got here. They've been a collaborative partner in that regard, but the longer term solution is going to take HPD, the DA, the Houston Area Women's Center, the Forensic Science Center, all of the members of the SART, because it's just too easy to get siloed and beleaguered by the monumental amount of cases that we really have to figure out how to address in this community.
Have y'all had a chance to sit down and talk with Acting Chief Satterwhite?
Yes.
What were those conversations like? How would you gauge his level of, I guess, not necessarily say interest per se, awareness or just being engaged in these conversations? Share more about that.
Yeah, as Sonia mentioned, we met for about an hour and a half last week with the chief. He is fully getting up to speed on the state of the investigation. He, of course, understood and knows HAWC, but I feel like now we have a personal relationship. He is very committed. The pretext for the conversation was help us make sure we're notifying victims appropriately, and help us make sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize the survivors that we're contacting. We want to do right, but we need help and we need advice, and that's exactly the mentality that we're looking for. We don't need HPD to be experts in all things at all times. Anybody who believes that is already off the right track. So I felt very encouraged after that conversation.